Hello and welcome to today's episode of the On the Up podcast brought to you from Moneypenny. My name's Dan Marshall and today I'm joined by Andy Bounds to talk about the building blocks of growth. Andy is a highly respected sales and communications consultant working with businesses around the world to help supercharge their growth strategies. Andy, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today.
You're welcome, Dan. It's great to be here.
Excellent. So in our conversation today, we're going to be talking about the building blocks of growth. I know you've worked with lots of different businesses around the world, as we just said, to help them with their growth. I think the important thing first, though, is to talk about how we define growth. What would you say to that as somebody who's worked with all these different companies?
Well, different companies define it in different ways, Dan, but usually, if you break it down, growth means something's better tomorrow than it is today, whatever that is. People normally seem to think that growth is to do with money, like getting in more fees or more clients or a higher average deal size. So it can be all that stuff. But sometimes growth happens just because you can do things more quickly or more pleasantly. In my simple childish view of life, I think of three things beginning with S. I want more success, I want more speed, and I want more smiling. Like I want to enjoy my job and I want my clients to enjoy their jobs more. So if you can bring that into a professional services firm, so there's more success, more speed, more smiling, I would count that as growth.
And even as you just said smiling, you made me smile there, which is just a great use of that word. So when you go into an organisation like that, where do you start when trying to implement those things and take them on that growth journey?
So it's the same as any organisation would do, really, where you're offering help. So I'm sure we have some wonderful, frankly, very good-looking listeners to us here. Imagine you're a lawyer. Well, what you would ask would be, let's say you're helping someone with a commercial transaction. One of the first questions would be, what outcome do you want from this transaction? What do you want for you? What do you want for them? Well, it's exactly the same with me. What I do is I go in and I say, so you say you want to grow more. So what sort of thing are you looking for? Is it numbers? Are you looking for more opportunities? Are you looking for a higher conversion rate? So question number one, where do you want to get to afterwards? Question number two, how will you measure you've got there? So if somebody says we want to have more charisma in our accountancy practice or something, I go, I'm sure you do. But how do you know you've got it? How do you measure that? So we talk about number one is outcome. Number two is measures. And then we work back from that, Dan, to work out the best steps to take to achieve those outcomes. So they're the three steps: outcomes, measures, steps.
I like that. It's very, very kind of thought out there. I think one of the things that you often find with anything growth, marketing, sales, whatever, I think measurement is always a place that people kind of struggle with. How do you help shape what measurement should look like and what a business should be looking to for success?
Well, fortunately, as you can tell from my haircut, I've been doing this for many decades and I've seen most of, I'm not seen everything, nobody has, but I have seen a lot of stuff. So I'll ask questions like, what outcomes do you want? And people will tell me what they think. Mm-hmm. And then I'll say, would you mind if I share with you what other people have said they wanted as their outcomes as well, just to make sure we're touching all bases? So, for example, no one has ever said to me, ever, Dan, ever in the history of me doing my job, I want to be better at doing calls to action. But if you're not good at calls to action, then nobody takes the action you want anyway. So this is one of the things that my customers don't often ask me for, but when I put it in their mind, they go, oh, actually, yeah, we need that. So you do that to start with the outcomes. And then with the measures, to answer your question, it's the same thing. I said, so how would you measure success? So let's say somebody wants to improve their BD. And I say, okay, so how would you measure that? And I've seen lots of measures other companies use. So they might say things like fees. And I say, okay, but what about things like we have more meetings in the diary? More of your colleagues contribute this than we're contributing. Every meeting you have has positive next steps. You make sure that you ask for one referral a week or whatever it might be. So the combination always is I ask the customer what they think, and then I say other things I've seen other people wanted this, will that help you as well? And the two of us just knock it together till we're happy.
Sounds good. So Andy, one of the things you obviously mentioned there was you've worked with lots of different businesses and types of organisations. Are there any kind of particular misconceptions or struggles that you find businesses collectively have when it comes to identifying growth strategies?
Yes. So number one, sales is a dirty word. That's a misconception. There's a feeling of I wasn't brought into this professional services organisation to do selling that is beneath me in some way. Now, selling is a dirty word if it's done in a dirty way, but if you do it in a charming way, like the other day, I went into the Apple store because I had a problem with my phone, and someone explained to me very calmly and nicely what the problem was. They explained I needed a new battery, and I got a new battery, and then my phone, which hadn't been working very well, suddenly started working well. And I was absolutely delighted, Dan. Now, you could say the Apple Store person made a sale, so sales are dirty, but as a customer, I was absolutely delighted because my thing was fixed. And so the way I look at sales is you work out the customer's outcomes that we just talked about. And then what you do is you work out you can jointly hold hands and skip together towards this outcome. You're not doing something to the client. You're holding hands. It's a joint thing, and you're working together to get them to this happy future place. So in my business, happy future place might be helping, a professional services company to make more sales. If you don't like the word sales, like generate fees. If you don't like that, help more people in more ways. So whatever word you like, that's my job. So once we work out they want to generate more fees, we then work out how to work together, holding hands to get them there. I think they would be as grateful to me as I was to the Apple Store for fixing the thing. So number one, sales is not a dirty word. And number two misconception is people sometimes think it's okay to do nothing. So what they do is they go, well, I'll just sit here like a little grateful baby bird and hopefully somebody will give me a worm every now and again. And I just don't believe that at all. I think in the professional world we live in, your minimum requirement for doing BD is to do more than nothing. Now, that doesn't sound a stretch target to me. Just do more than nothing. Just ring a previous client you've not spoken to for a year and say, not spoken to for a bit, how are you? You might want to use the word new. I use this a lot. This is a top BD tip. What you do is speak to someone you've not spoken to for a while. And I say, there's a couple of new things I'm seeing go on in the sector. If you got 10 minutes, let me know. We can have a chat about it. People always go yes because they want to know what's going on in the sector. And I've now got a potential interested party who might want to buy from me. They might not. We might just have a lovely 10-minute conversation, but I'm still adding value. So they're the two misconceptions. Sales is not a dirty word. All right, it's not a dirty word. And number two, you've got to do more than nothing.
Yeah, the notion of that you can do more than nothing is quite alien to me. You know, it's very rare that I think I've encountered a team like that personally. But to think that some people take that approach is crazy in this day and age. And sales more than ever is such an important part of a business, isn't it?
It is, but also people don't think they're doing nothing. So at the end of the week, you might say, oh, you were going to try and ask a couple of your favorite clients if they give you a recommendation. Did you get around to it? And people say, oh, no, I ran out of time. I really wanted to. So often it's not that they meant to do nothing, but what they do is they say I ran out of time, and so what they're doing there, Dan, is they blame time. It's almost like I ran out of time, so it's time's fault. You know, if there'd been 25 hours in the day, I would have been doing it like a good one. And you go, no, you wouldn't. It's not to do with time. It's to do with your own priority. It's to do with your own discipline. It's to do with your own taking responsibility for it. So I don't have a huge amount of sympathy when people say they don't have time for it, because I say, well, you should have just put some time in your Outlook calendar, then you would have had time. So people do often do nothing, even if they didn't mean to, but they convince themselves it's not their fault.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. Do you find with that then that prioritization actually in itself almost becomes a key thing as well? I guess for growth, in that, you know, people need to be doing the right things at the right time. So do you find when you go into an organization, sometimes you just happen to kind of almost direct them to those right things?
Yes. So what happens is when we've done our work, so you said about prioritization, when we finished our work, we do an exercise, and it's 3 words ending in I's, which is prioritize, diarize, and socialize. So I'll just explain what I mean by that. So when I finish training an organization, a group of people, we then do the prioritize, the thing you've just said. So what are the things we need to be doing every week? And just how much do you have to do? Just more than none. Like, just do more than nothing. Just do more than. So you prioritize the things that are going to work. So for example, for most organizations, cold calling doesn't work and everyone hates it. So don't do that. But for most organizations, speaking to a happy client to ask them to recommend you to somebody else, that does tend to work quite well. So probably do that. So you prioritize things that are most likely to work. That's the first thing we do. And different people prioritize different things, Dan. That's fine. So you might want to go for introductions. I might go for ringing previous customers. It doesn't matter. Prioritize your thing. What we then do is we then do diarize, and we say, right, now you know your priority thing. You've got to put time in your diary. So what I do is I put time in my diary Wednesday morning and Thursday morning, just 20 minutes each day. That's it. So it's only 20, it's 40 minutes a whole week. I have the rest of my week to do my day job. And I put it in Wednesday and Thursday. I don't want to do it Monday and Tuesday, my BD stuff, because I can't be bothered. I want to do my day job then. But Wednesday and Thursday, I have 20 minutes for BD, 20 minutes for BD on both Wednesdays and Thursdays. And I do it in the morning because I get worse during the day. Generally after lunch, I'm just terrible. And then the final thing, so once I've prioritized what I'm going to do, and once I put it in the diary, I've diarized it, the final thing is socialize. And what we mean by that is we ask someone else to hold us to account. Because you know what's going to happen if your diary reminder comes up saying you're supposed to be doing BD now, Andy, and I'm busy doing something else, or I can't be bothered. What I'll do is I'll press dismiss on my diary reminder, and at the end of the week I'll go, well, it's not my fault, it was time's fault. But if I've got someone who checks up on me on Friday, say, oh, did you ask for your referrals this week, Andy? Did you speak to your previous customers this week? So I always want someone to hold me to account. So polite people call this an accountability partner. I just like to call it a friendly word like socialize. I mean, you could use an unfriendly word, you're being watched. You want someone to watch you to make sure you do this stuff, or you might not. And I would humbly suggest that if any of those three are missing, prioritize, diarize, and socialize, if any of those are missing, you will not always be good at BD unless you happen to always be good at BD. So if you don't prioritize, you don't know what you should be doing. If you don't diarize, you don't have any time to do it anyway. And if you don't socialize it, well, who's going to hold you to account if you don't? Sorry, that was a bit ranty. I hope that helped.
No, that's great. I love that. I love the idea that about socialize, because as you were speaking through the first point, I was going to ask, how do you deal with accountability? How do you hold people to account? And, naturally, your mind goes to when you're looking for a really great sales leader in that business, or a great kind of leadership person to come in and hold people to account. That notion of socialize being added to that makes it a bit softer, but also your colleagues, your team that you're working with can be the ones to hold you to account. I think that will really help to create a great culture in a team as well, which only helps that team to be better. So I love that element of that. That's really, really cool.
And it's an interesting one as well, because there's a temptation that it has to be my manager. So if I didn't do it, it's my manager's fault because they didn't check up on me. So what I like to do is I don't mind who holds me to account. The key word is not management. The key word is relentless. They have to relentlessly hold me to account. So the person who holds me to account is my PA. So I suppose I'm her boss normally, but actually, as far as this goes, the accountability, she's my boss. So at the end of the week, she'll say, did you do this on Wednesday and Thursday? And if I haven't, she'll just say, well, you have to do twice next week then, won't you?
Yeah.
Because we've actually got that agreement. So it doesn't need to be a senior person. The keyword is relentless. Find someone who will relentlessly do it and also won't let you off the hook. So if I was to say to Emma, but I was really busy on Wednesday, she'll just say, all right, well, that happens. You'll just have to do twice as much next week, won't you? She will never say, that's all right, don't worry. Otherwise, I'm not being held to account.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And it's a good reminder for you to always be on top of that activity, isn't it? And always have that intensity behind it. It's definitely a really important thing as well. Obviously, there's a few different things we've mentioned there, Andy. Is there one thing that you think is most important for businesses when it comes to growing?
I don't know if there's one thing. I mean, there's lots of things that you could talk about, really. The prioritize, diarize, socialize, you can't succeed without those three. Mm-hmm. So the last two are quite straightforward. Diarize, put it in your diary. Socialize, as someone told you to account. But the prioritize is the thing what you need to focus on. So people need to be aware what the options are before they can prioritize. So, for example, what people often do to try and grow is they look at what everybody else is doing. Mm-hmm. So if somebody was to look at what I was doing on the outside, they might think, he seems to be quite well known, so probably I need to do what he does. So he seems to post on LinkedIn, so I need to do that. He seems to do videos, so I need to do that. He's written some books. Do I have to write a book? Said he's worked in 50 countries. Oh, I can't be bothered. And all these things. So what happens is we tend to look at what everybody else is doing. And that in some ways is a good idea, but the reason it's a bad idea is the only thing you'll see me do, for example, is the visible stuff. So LinkedIn posts are visible. The book, it's visible. But this main source of my growth comes from invisible stuff. So it's things like speaking to people who already like me and asking them one of two questions, how else or who else? So how else is, how else can I help you? Because sometimes people say, could you also do X? And or saying who else do you know who'd benefit from what I do? So if I was to saying to you, Dan, if you were currently buying from me, so you've got your own legal practice, and I say, how else can I help you? And you might say, well, can you help us with our bids and our tenders? Because we don't win many of those. I could say, yes, and I've got a new piece of business and you're delighted. Or if I said, of all the clients you've got, Dan, who else do you know who needs to increase their sales a bit? And you could say, oh, this client here. they really could do it. They're not hitting their targets. They're getting a lot of trouble from their investors. I say, oh, would you mind introducing me? You go, yeah, it's fine. And so you can see, if you didn't know that, you don't know that. So you'll copy my LinkedIn post and think that's the secret to success. The secret to success for my business is saying how else or who else to everyone who likes me anyway. Now, nobody can see that in the outside world. So what you want to do to grow is learn what the best people do. And often that's not just watching them, it's sometimes interviewing them. So one thing which I do to anyone, I always want to help people, give them advice. So I say, if anybody's got any questions for me, just fire me a question over on LinkedIn, and then I can just like LinkedIn you back. And just, so sometimes people say, I've got a team who don't really like selling. What's your top tip? Or some people say, I don't really like talking about price with clients. What's your top tip? And so I just like giving out these bits of advice because it helps people prioritize the things they should be doing. But I come back to my previous answer, the 3 things you need: prioritize, diarize, socialize, or you're knackered.
That sounds great. I think one of the things just picking up on a few things that you've said there as well, it's actually kind of the power of relationships and network within that as well. The sense of building good relationships with those clients, that you can ask them for those recommendations and you can ask them for where else you can go for help. And I guess at the same time, on the flip side of that, when you're saying, can you drop me a message on LinkedIn, you're kind of giving that advice freely as well, aren't you? So I suppose in many senses, it all comes down to network, relationship, how you conduct yourself with other people as well. That's obviously a big driver, because you could ask who else, but if someone doesn't have a good relationship with you or doesn't value you, then they're probably not going to say anybody else.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And there's a couple of things that spring to mind there. One of them is, you're right about the network, and it is called network. It's not called net mess about like it's work. You have to invest a bit of time in it. And the other thing about your network, you can grade your network in different ways. My simple thing is, people are most likely to help me and want to help me if they know me and they owe me. So if they know me well, because they've spoken to me and we're friends and we trust each other, that's the knowing part. And if they owe me in some way because they think I've helped them, then the basic rule of reciprocity, people are happy to help. So if somebody asks me 3 or 4 questions on LinkedIn, I'm happy to help them and I answer their questions. But I also think that's okay if I, a few months later, say, oh, by the way, I see you're connected to so-and-so. Would you feel comfortable introducing me? They may or they may not, but they know me and they owe me, so they're more likely to do it. If I went in totally cold, it's not going to work. And here's a top tip for people listening. Why don't you write a list of 10, 20 people who you think you want a good relationship with, and you just grade them all for how well do they know you and how well do they owe you? Do they feel in your debt at all? And it's a very simple thing. I just do a little ABC thing for each one. Dan, how well do they know me? Right, me mum, A, she knows me really well. Richard Branson, C, never heard of me. So you just go through how well do they know me? And then you think, how much do they owe me? Have I given them value? Have I volunteered stuff for them? Have I gone the extra mile for them? If I have, it's an A. And if I've not done anything they feel they owe me for, then it's a C. And it's a really nice little thing to do because everyone thinks they're good at relationship building, Dan. But when you do this, unless you've got A's everywhere, it means you're not perfect. And that's fine, because then you can do something about it, yeah?
Yeah, that's a great tip. I love that. I think that's a takeaway that anybody that's looking to kind of sell or build relationships can be doing straight away today. Like, I'm already in my head now thinking about who's my list of people that I can start to grade there. So it's a brilliant tip. So just changing track a little bit here then, Andy, to put a bit of a different direction around what growth is. What do you think are the skill sets that businesses need to either hire in or develop within their organization to maximize growth in their company?
Well, certainly you need to get the right sort of people in. There's an old saying in recruitment, I hope this is okay to say on the podcast, that if you've got a hole in your team, you're better off with a hole than an asshole. So you want to make sure you recruit good people. Mm-hmm. So they have to live your values and so on. And there are certain things that you need if you want to help growth. So you have to be quite proactive. There has to be a sense of optimism, because sometimes it doesn't work and you have to go again. That word relentless, you have to keep going. Now, relentless, you don't have to do it every single minute of the day, just more than nothing every week. That's fine. So this idea about proactive and optimistic and relentless, these are the sort of characteristics you'd probably want anyway. But certainly the other one is the sense of taking responsibility for it. As I say, I struggle a bit where people say, well, it's not my fault, it's time's fault. Or my boss didn't remind me so, and all that sort of stuff. I think we should take our own responsibility a bit. So certainly they're the sort of people I will be looking to recruit, and they're the sort of people I do recruit. because you hire for what they say, you hire for attitude and you train for skill or whatever it is. Like if someone has those characteristics about being proactive and optimistic, I'm sure I can teach them the X, Y, Z, the mechanics of doing the job if I need to.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. And I think generally I would say they are characteristics that, if you'd agree, that maybe you can't train as much. They're almost those innate kind of values that people need to have, aren't they?
That's right. But you then have to, if you think they're important attributes of the people you're recruiting, you then need to work out questions to ask to do that. So, for example, with proactivity, you can either say, give me an example where you show proactivity, or you could give people a what if situation and say, so I just would be interested, what if your largest client got in contact and said they were going to move to one of our competitors? What would you do about that? You know, so just see how people are answering the what if questions, because I struggle a lot, I think. You know, everyone thinks they're proactive compared to reactive. Like everyone, if I was to ask every single listener to us two here, do you think you're above average for being proactive? Everyone would say yes. Like everyone. No one thinks they're reactive. Everyone thinks they're proactive. Everyone. And then, of course, if I say, so everyone is above average, are they? And everyone goes, yes, we are. And then I say, okay, now let me just explain how averages work. Because half of you are worse than average. That's what an average is. So everyone thinks they're above average for proactivity, but half of us aren't, because that's what an average is. So testing things like, how would you deal with this, and how did you overcome a setback, and all that sort of stuff. These are really important things to test.
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it, to get the right people in your business and those characteristics that you can develop to fuel your future growth. One of the things as well with growth is that obviously people is a big part of it, but I think more and more technology, and I don't want to be the person that mentions AI on a podcast, I'm sure that's been done to death, but you know, tech and AI can help in this sense as well. And just be good to get your thoughts, Andy, on how you're finding that in the businesses you work with. Is this something that they're looking at? Is it something you recommend? What's your kind of take on this space at the moment?
So I'm going to give you my answer because you've asked me and I'm your guest on your podcast. This is not my expertise at all. I'm 55. I'm old. I use pen and paper to make notes and so on. So some of my customers are beginning to look at AI. Some of my customers, I mean, everyone now is doing the technology pretty well. You know, we can generally do Zoom and Teams and all that sort of stuff. People are generally good at that sort of thing. The thing you just have to watch with anything, whether it's technology or anything, is you have to make sure you ask the question, did it improve things? Because it's very easy to ask the question instead, is it cool? Rather than did it work? So you often used to see this with marketing campaigns, and some people still do the same. And they say, like, did you like our campaign? And I just think that's totally the wrong question. The question is, did it cause any leads? You know, did it generate any opportunities for us? So if you do a marketing campaign for me, and the first question you ask me is, did you like my advert? I'm going to go, no, Dan, that's not the question. The first thing is, let me tell you how many leads it generated, because that's the only thing that matters. So the rule with AI is the same as the rule with technology, is the same with any input at all. It's good if it improves the output. And the way I think about outputs, like I said before, is to do with those 3 S's, success, speed, and smiling. So if AI brings you more success and or more speed and or more smiling, fill your boots, but don't just do it because it's shiny.
Yeah, I guess that's it. It almost comes back to your prioritize message that you said before as well. Like, how do you prioritize? Is technology going to help you make things better? What technology is going to make things better? And then in that same 3-step process, prioritize, diarize, socialize, implement it, hold it to account, and see if it's working. It's very much a varied thing, isn't it? AI and tech. It's what everyone's talking about all the time. So I'm sure it will be continued to be spoken about in those regards. But I guess it's also a really important thing to make sure, are things getting better with it than they were before?
Yeah, and it's one of those that you don't want to look too much of a Luddite, but you also want to do stuff which is going to bring that success, speed, and smiling. So we used to do quite a lot of adverts on Facebook, like many years ago. And these take a while to write. And then we suddenly realized we were doing this because we thought we ought to do this, because this when everyone did these things on Facebook. And then we tracked it, and we had not ever had one piece of business arising from it, ever. Even though I spent ages writing the bloody things, it just didn't cause any impact at all. And it's one of those, we fell into the trap that other people do. You just copy what everyone else is doing. That's not the right thing to do. You copy things that work. So fine, if you want to just explore it. Obviously, if somebody wants something about technology or AI, speak to an expert. In other words, not me. So you want to find somebody who's good at this and just sort of ask them, but don't do it unless it's going to improve things. I hate this shiny syndrome. people forget things very quickly. So I'm going to date our podcast now, but fairly recently, people were talking about Keir Starmer getting some glasses, right? And it was a big kickoff on the front page of all the papers. And people were saying, this is big news, it's going to bring the government down and so on. If someone listens to this podcast, let's say 18 months from now, and I say Keir Starmer glasses, they will go, what? Because it's like today's amazing thing is just tomorrow's chip paper. Sometimes, not always, sometimes. And so we just need to make sure we're not just following fads. Just do a bit more research, that's all.
Yeah, that makes sense, makes complete sense. It's interesting you mentioned Keir Starmer, actually, because one of my other questions I wanted to get your thoughts on, actually, is, you know, and I'm dating the podcast a little bit here as well. We're near to a budget announcement, so we're mid-October at the moment, and that's due at the end of the month. And one of the things that I think was a big thing for Labour in their kind of election strategy was growth for the country, growth for the economy, and for the businesses within it. And with that budget coming up, what do you, as somebody that goes into a lot of businesses helping with growth, what do you want to see from the government to help businesses grow in the UK?
Wow, that's a really good question. So I'm sure Rachel Reeves will be listening to this. So when I look at growth, there's two things. There's enablers and blockers, or happy things and sad things. So what I want to see for my own business and my own life is stuff which enables my enablers, you know. So if it's things like, if it helps my business grow to hire people, I want it to be easier to hire people. If it helps my business to be able to, I don't know, build a house quickly, I want to be able to build a house quickly. So I want to be able to deal with this enabler stuff. But the other thing I want to stop things that slow me down needlessly, because there are things that sometimes need. So I'm not at all one of these people who thinks regulation's bad. You know, when people talk about like regulation keep us alive. When Health and Safety Act first came in, I mean, it actually changed the world and kept us alive. So, but there are some regulations maybe that we don't need as much. So the thing I really want, it's not just the budget question, is I want everyone, not just the government, I want everyone to do stuff which maximizes the chance of the enablers working. And if there is stuff which is needlessly blocking, if there's some way around it. So I'm really interested in what they do. I like change. They have a different outlook to the previous lot, so we'll see how they get on. And if I'm a British chap, I want Britain to do well, so I wish them all the best, just like I wish the last lot all the best when they were in charge. So let's just see what happens.
Yeah, it's really interesting thing to look forward to at the moment, I think, isn't it? Because so many businesses want to grow, and like you say, everybody wants to be enabled to grow. I think people are looking to that budget almost as a point in time right now to say, okay, how much can we grow? What can we do to affect our growth quickly?
But to go back to what we said before about proactivity and optimism and, you know, taking accountability, yes, the budget's going to have an impact, but you can do a whole lot without waiting for your boss or waiting for the Chancellor of the Exchequer or waiting for the Prime Minister or something. So just ring up 10 clients who bought a lot from me over the last 2 years and say, how else can we help you, and see what happens. Email 100 people who you've spoken to in the last 2 years and say the word new in the email. So say, there's a couple of new things going on in the property sector. Give us 10 minutes, I'll let you know what they are. We can have a chat about it. I mean, that is really easy. You don't need to wait for anything. Yeah. So people often say, yeah, there's a budget around the corner, or yes, we've got the team away day a week on Thursday and all that stuff. Just do stuff now. And anytime someone says, I've not got time, that's when I come in on my Tarzan swing and say the word diary. The only way to have time is to put time in the diary. So you and I, busy little bees, aren't we? Don't really have time for this podcast. Yet here we are recording it because it's in the diary. Yeah. All right. We didn't just sit here with nothing to do and we thought we'd give it a go. So you proactively put stuff in the diary. One of my clients owns his own business, and a few months ago he said to me he wanted to stop working on Fridays. And I said, all right, we'll stop working on Fridays then. And he goes, well, like, I can't. And I said, okay, why not? He goes, because I got something in the diary on Friday. So what about the Friday afterwards? And he said, I got something then. What about the Friday afterwards? Got nothing in there. I said, right, block the whole day out. He goes, what shall I call it? I say, not in work. And he goes, well, I need to call it something else. I said, all right, call it strategic creativity, off-site or something, if that makes you feel better. But block the whole day out. What are you doing the Friday afterwards? What are you doing the Friday afterwards? And it's one of those things, he wanted to start working Fridays and he thought it would happen by magic. It won't happen by magic. You proactively fix your diary, because if you fix your diary, you fix your life. And so it's one of these things, what do I hope people listening to this recording change as a result of it? Wouldn't it be really boring if they just changed the diary a bit? Because if you just change your diary, all of a sudden you magically have time for the stuff you should be doing.
But it's true. Everyone is beholden to their diary, what's in the diary, and people pay attention to that, don't they? So, you know, if you take it out of the diary or you put something in the diary, it's more than likely going to happen, isn't it? So maybe that is a top top tip for anyone listening to the podcast. Practical, actionable, and not difficult to do. It really is something everybody should do that. So it could be really, really helpful for people. I think from me, Andy, I've got one final question actually, and it kind of centres around tips as well. But we've spoken about a lot of different things there. But what would be your biggest tip for businesses looking to grow in 2025?
Oh, biggest tip is going to be these 3 words. So if anyone's making notes, I'm sure everyone is, if they're cycling around listening to this. The 3 words are afters, product, price. And I'll just explain what I mean. Afters, product, price. That's the best way to sell anything. Afters, product, price. So afters is why is the customer going to be better off after you. So the first thing to talk about is the afters, the outcomes and the measures we talked about before. So afters. So if someone's doing some sort of deal, you say, what outcome are you looking to achieve with this? How will you measure you've done it? If I'm working with an organization, what would you like your fees to be? How many of your colleagues do you want to contribute to that growth? All right, and how are we going to measure it? So number 1, you find the happy future place or where they're going to be after you. Then you talk about your products or your services. Let's talk about how we can help you get there. And then finally, you talk about your fees. And you do it verbally, okay? If someone's going to charge me £10,000, I want them to tell me verbally it's £10,000. If I want to kick off about it, I can kick off and we can have a chat about it. But if you hide behind an email and say in small writing at the bottom, by the way, the fees are 10,000, I'll say, well, you didn't mention that in Starbucks, did you? So I want you to go verbal, but also I want you to talk about your fees as late as you can. So I want to hear about the afters to start with. Why will I be better off after you? And then talk about your products and your services. How are you going to get me to these afters? So I understand the price in the context of the value. So I had a conversation with someone very recently, and we agreed that firstly, the afters, they wanted more sales and they wanted all their team to contribute. And we thought if it worked really well, it might bring £5 to £10 million of fees. But even if it only worked pretty well, it'd still be at least a couple of million. And then after we'd done that, we then worked out what the products and services were going to be to get them there, a few webinars, bit of coaching, blah, blah, blah. And then what we did is we worked out what the price was going to be. But by the time I quoted the price, they already knew they were going to get somewhere between £2 and £10 million of sales and all these webinars and all this and all this and all this and all this. So by the time I said the price looked quite good value for money. Whereas if we'd done the way that people normally say, because they don't like talking about fees, so either they don't talk about fees at all, or what they do is the first thing they say, look, it's £50,000, don't hate me, then it just doesn't work. Because if the first thing you say is it's £50,000, somebody else will say, yeah, but your competitors are 40,000, so I'll go with them. So this is a bit of a rant, but the 3 words are the right order to sell is afters, product, price. So if anybody wants some homework, have a look at your 3 or 4 most recent BD communications, and did you speak in that order? So if you wrote a proposal, did you have afters early? And then did you talk about your products, and was your final section about the price? If you did a sales presentation, did you start with afters early? Here's how we'll help you export into Belgium, whatever it is. And then you have the products, and then you end with, and our price for delivering it is this. When you had a verbal conversation in Starbucks, did you start by saying, what outcome do you want and how will we measure it? All right, well, let's have a look at the products. Now let me confirm the price. So afters, product, price is by far and away the best order to sell anything. Mm-hmm. And if you do things that way, selling doesn't become a dirty thing. The afters are the joint place you're trying to get to. The products is the step-by-step way you're going to get there. And the price almost becomes I wouldn't say a throwaway thing, because of course it's important, but people are now looking at the price in the context of the value you can deliver. Afters, product, price.
Excellent. That's a great tip. And there's actually been lots of great tips today, Andy. So really, really appreciative of your time. I think for me, there's quite a nice collection of 3 threes here to take away. You've got success, speed, smiling, prioritize, diarize, socialize, and then afters, product, price. A nice catchy 3 takeaways for everybody to go and take a look at after they've listened to us today. So hopefully people think on that and put some of those things into action. I know I definitely will be. So to finish, I just wanted to say thank you very much for your time and for joining us. It's been a real pleasure to speak to you. And as I say, hopefully there's lots of actions people can take away from this.
Yeah, no, you're very welcome, Dan. And as I say, if anyone has any follow-up questions, I'm on LinkedIn. So just find me over a little message and we'll have a chat.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Andy. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the On the Up podcast brought to you from Moneypenny. Stay tuned for our next episode coming soon.